Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Fabian. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking a few minutes, especially on a Friday afternoon. Before we delve into all things technology, automotive, AI, let's learn a little bit more about yourself first. You're currently working with ServiceNow, have worked with AWS and a number of exciting companies, but would you mind just bringing that to life for us?
Sure, of course. Well, first of all, again, thanks for having me. Very excited to be part of this podcast, and I hope I can add value. So I'm from Germany, a greater area of Munich. For all the Bavarians listening, it's Lower Bavaria, actually, where I'm from. And I had the luxury, to be honest, to have had the chance to start my career at Texas Instruments. I was an intern 3 years there. They gave me the opportunity to start my career. And being in high tech and semicon world as a starter is very helpful for everything that comes later. It's a fast-paced environment. I started as a data scientist. I'm not sure if that role even still exists. Probably it does. Back then, when AI was not such a big hype, data scientists were rare resources. And TI really, so they sent me in a rotation program and they really let me dive deep into what it means to manufacture complex products and then also how to steer a very complex supply chain. So these are the two major areas I really fell in love with. And I always felt comfortable with the business side of things. Well, and then combining it with AI usually makes the biggest impact if you know the business side. But then after a few years, and I still don't know why actually, I left TI. Was a tough decision, but then I joined Allianz Germany to see a completely different field. And being in insurance and the chief customer office was again a really enlightening experience because even though insurance was not my big thing, it was still interesting to see how customer feedback drives innovation and also satisfaction in products. So that added a new kind of thing on top of what I already knew. Well, and then I got the opportunity to join AWS. And for all the techies listening, I think AWS, you want to be with the cool kids on the block. I started as a consultant in professional services. I saw, again, many very cool manufacturing projects. And then at some point, I wanted to have a promotion. And my back then manager said, well, I'm working with this German car company, and it would be helpful if you maybe also see what automotive is doing and not just stick in your healthcare life science side of things. And I think he just wanted to trick me into automotive to be with his customer. And this is where I started my journey. And I think it's safe to say, because there are a lot of blog posts out there, that this customer was BMW. And now that I think about it, you see my name tagged to BMW often. And I've been with them for 2.5 years, which was pretty cool. And so I saw a lot of things on data, AI, innovation, what automotive is doing, what they need. And it was a hard decision to then leave BMW behind as my customer. But then I joined another semicon company. So I consulted another semicon company. And then ServiceNow came along. And now I'm with ServiceNow as we record this podcast for 1.5 months only. But I can already say, like, very good decision, very good stuff. And I hope I can also enlighten our listeners a little bit about that. And what I want to say with all that story is that a journey in AI is not linear. It comes with all the ups and downs. It comes with the business acumen, the technology, and you always need to find that path where you feel comfortable. And I always felt comfortable being between business and technology. And that's why I'm a business development manager today, in the intersection. And yeah, it's not linear. So whatever you do today, go for whatever you want to do. It's a good choice anyways. Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Thank you so much, Michael. Fascinating journey. GenAI is a fairly recent development, and over the past couple of years, you've worked prominently with AWS and ServiceNow now. What does GenAI mean from your experience, not just for these two companies where you might have some particular insight, but also for technology partners more widely. How disruptive is GenAI for them, or what kind of opportunity does it present to them to help some of the incumbents level up on GenAI?
Oh, yeah, I love that question a lot. I throw out a provocative statement and then I answer your question. My provocative statement is GenAI is nothing but a chatbot. So there's no business value behind. But that's a bit provocative and also wrong in some ways. So let me put that a little bit deeper. GenAI is disruptive, and people have some fear of GenAI taking their job, GenAI maybe ruling the world. But the conversations that I had and I still have are the same as I had 8 years ago. Whenever somebody comes and says, "Oh, I need to be innovative, I need to do GenAI," my first question I keep asking them is, "What's your data strategy?" Because without the right data, GenAI knows something already, right? It was trained on data, so that it has some common knowledge. But what businesses are often facing is they want to improve a business process. So in order to improve a business process that GenAI doesn't know, you need to feed the right data into your generative AI system. And that's why I see a lot of customers fail in this space. And now it's 2024. I need to think which year we have. Interesting. So 2023 was kind of the year of the POCs, if you will. Experimenting, figuring out how things work, see what's possible. And 2024 is more the year of industrializing those POCs. And it's very interesting. I can't remember the exact number, but there was one consultancy company that did a study on how many projects actually went from POC to production in the GenAI world. And it was, I think, 30% or 25 or something. So like really low number. And the number is even lower compared to regular IT projects and regular POCs in IT. And the reason is that either people figured out the reason that data is the real disruptor in that kind of chain, and then they are disruptive and they come up with new things that really automate processes or make life easier, make their workforce more productive. And then there are the others who are really disappointed, who said, "Well, I thought I'm gonna save double-digit millions here, and I end up having a chatbot. So why?" And then often the IT department gets blamed, or the external consultancy, whoever is like, "Why didn't you figure this out? You're not good enough." And it's not a matter of being good or not. It's always the matter of having the right strategy in place. Where is my data? What data do I consume? And how do I apply this knowledge against my business problem? So I think GenAI is disruptive, but only to the extent where you make use of your knowledge. And okay, I promised myself to not advertise too much about what ServiceNow is doing. But the cool thing is I always talk customers into putting their data into the right place. And with ServiceNow, that's very interesting. It changed a little bit because once they've built a platform already, the data is already there. So my conversations actually got very easy now. I don't need to talk through all the data journey because the data is already there. And that's something that customers realize just now slowly, like, okay, wow, if I have my data in one platform, I'm good to go, versus I need to build that data layer first. And then I can be disruptive. So yeah, not sure if that answers your question accurately, but that's kind of what I'm seeing through all the conversations and projects I've been involved in.
No, thanks so much, Michael. I mean, data definitely seems to be still a big constraint for many organizations when it gets to scaling some of these proof of concepts. And you mentioned this sort of stat there of sort of 30%. I've seen studies that suggest that it's actually closer to 20 or sub 20%, but incredibly low. Are there any other barriers to scaling some of these initiatives? Doesn't always have to be a POC, although that's often where it starts. Have you seen any other barriers to successfully unlocking the value of GenAI?
Yeah, so I think so in my mind, again, my personal opinion, but I think there are two things that hinder companies scaling. One is if there's this conversation between buy versus build. Do I buy a product that just scales automatically out of the box, or do I build it? And what many companies often confuse is it doesn't matter if I buy or build. If I start with a narrow use case that I haven't thought through until the end, then I see that it works, but I have built a system really narrowed down to that single thing. And then immediately I want to scale and say, okay, now let's open it up for everyone. Then it's a problem because they designed everything for that single purpose without thinking about going broader. And the concept I like to call this is platform, not necessarily platform as in ServiceNow platform, because I work in ServiceNow. More think of a general platform that you could build as an AI platform within your company that enables an entire company being agnostic to use cases and scale those out of the box. That's one approach. And that usually helps if you build, well, and let me say this, it's not necessarily bound to GenAI. We had the same problem back in the days when like regular machine learning was the thing, when it came to shop floor optimization. If I'm optimizing one machine for predictive maintenance with a machine learning model, then everybody was like, okay, now let's scale it across all the machines. But that just doesn't work. Every machine is different. Every process is different. So you probably need a separate model for each process, or you have a system that automatically picks up things and scales. And I have been a data scientist, so I can blame myself for doing this narrow thing in the past. You can't scale from one machine to the other. And that's the same in GenAI. If you fix one use case, it just doesn't scale across other use cases. So that's one thing, like having an open mind and a design in place that takes a look at all the aspects and how do I want to move forward, having the right roadmap, thinking of platform. But then this is the other thing that I learned the past 1.5 months that I never had actually as a thought, but is so true, is the automation. When you think of a GenAI system that does something, that's awesome. But if you need to manually trigger things and then need to manually take actions, then you have a gain because generative AI gave you insights, summarized something. It might have given you ideas what to do next, but you still need to perform that task yourself. And oftentimes after the innovation comes the automation phase, but then the automation is super, super tough because usually various systems are involved. You need to think of, okay, I have now an output from my GenAI. What do I do with this? I want to trigger that system, collect that feedback, do the next thing. And it becomes, all of a sudden, it becomes a major IT project that probably blows up the budget. And again, having my ServiceNow lens on, that's something that is baked into our platform, at least automatically, which is another topic that I don't need to worry about because it's already there. But even so, if you don't have ServiceNow today, it doesn't matter. You still should think about automation. And you should think about when you build your systems, how do you want to automate later? Because that's crucial. Without the automation, the ROI you get from investing into GenAI is not as high as it could be.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into at least 2 points there. You mentioned that historically and in some areas still today, we take quite a narrow view on what the problem is and what the solution should be, whereas we should probably think more about a platform. And then what we see a lot in automotive is, unfortunately, still in lots of areas, this silo focus, just sort of BU, business unit, internal orientation, and potentially a lack of sort of collaboration across the chain, even though loads of use cases also for GenAI are cross-functional. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the governance side there. First of all, is this an observation you've made as well? And have you seen any good examples or potentially any recommendations that you would suggest companies adopt to avoid this sort of too narrow view and thereby not fully unlocking the potential?
Yeah, so an interesting one. So yes, if I could give you a list of 10, 15 customers that I've worked with, and I wouldn't say all of them, but many of them had exactly the same problem, that it's the silo IT or shadow IT, as it's called sometimes in manufacturing, where everybody has their own silo. Everybody builds something on the side. Nobody has a streamlined process. Nobody has a central strategy. And what I've seen worked best, and that's an approach that AWS actually pushed heavily into customers, is a center of excellence, specifically cloud center of excellence, because AWS is a cloud provider. But I like that approach a lot. If you had a central place and say you had a central strategy on how you handle a center of excellence of AI, say, how you approach AI as a whole. And that center of excellence has also a close relationship with the CDO. Many companies already have a chief data officer these days. Some even hire a chief AI officer. But I think that comes in the next 2-3 years, even bigger. But if you had a central team, then you at least have the opportunity to set standards on how every single business unit should behave and adopt GenAI, how they should, make use of it, and how things are reported into one single point of view. However, that's the theory. In practice, a BU will say, it's IT. I don't want to talk to IT. They are slow. They cost a lot. I'd rather do it on my own. I'd rather secretly develop my own homegrown things because I can do it much better, and IT doesn't understand my business that well. For that argument, I can have just two answers. That one I have seen, the other one is my wish list. My wish list would be that the IT department with the center of excellence would be upskilled in the business acumen, that you intentionally hire people who understand the business or develop them into a trusted function for specific business units, because then there is a marriage between the business problem, the breaking up the silo, sharing what they are doing with other BUs. It's centralized, there's central governance around, there's one streamlined process. That's my wish list. That probably will never happen because we're all humans and we like to defend what's our own. So it's kind of in our nature to protect ourselves a little bit. Well, the other thing is, and I like to call it a top-down approach. If you think of a leadership team as C-level executives that really push that messaging downwards and say, we have a strategy, and every single business unit needs to follow that strategy, which means if you build something, you collaborate with the COE. You make sure that it's streamlined. You make sure you share, and if you violate that, then you're in trouble. Because that's usually the only thing that helps when it comes to silos, like the push from above. And I think BMW, so I need to be careful what I can share, of course, as a Vermin customer. What I think what BMW is doing very, very well, and that's why for me, they're one of the leaders in the market. And when it comes to AI, don't get me wrong, automotive, everybody has an opinion who is the leader on the market. But when it comes to AI development, when you look at BMW being at keynotes, they at AWS, what they share, what they do, there's a reason why they are so innovative, because I feel like their board members, their leaders, have really understood what it needs and what it takes to streamline an organization and bring them together. That doesn't mean that they're free of silos. Probably, they have 120,000 people working for them, so there are probably silos. But the innovation pace is way higher because they want to enforce kind of a harmonized version of what's possible. It's my impression from a little bit inside, a little bit from the outside, but I think that's what works best. And we typically, and then I stop my kind of 10-minute brainstorm here. But what I see in German companies specifically, it's often a bottom-up approach that teams try to push their thoughts upwards and say that's what needs to happen. And then you have a whatever, I don't know, head of this business unit versus the other head of this business unit. And then those silos start fighting against each other because every head of thinks that their team is the best and does the right thing. So it never gets populated into the top. And the top is confused. How do we build the right strategy? Because we're not aligned. Nobody really knows what the right approach is. And bottom up is confusing when it comes to AI and data strategy. My impression. So top down is the better way to do. So yeah, I hope that answers to some extent.
No, it's super interesting. Just fun fact while I was taking my notes here that the chief AI officer would abbreviate as Chow. But on a more serious note, you were talking about business value quite a bit there, and what I see a lot is that a question that naturally, especially senior execs ask quite early on when they talk about GenAI is what is the value associated with it? And also from some of these conversations that I'm having on here, there seems to be a real need to, especially with some of the initial POCs and then the attempt to scale them, that there needs to be a strong value case associated with them. And in a lot of cases, some of these value metrics that we're addressing with these GenAI solutions can potentially be a little bit intangible. I was just wondering if you've what your observations are with some of the companies you've worked with, or some of the wider conversations you were having around this topic of value. Are there any sort of insights, good examples, and recommendations you could share?
Sure. Yeah, that's the value association is a tricky one. Specifically, so I'm in Germany. I'm quite honest. I think we promised each other to be honest in the podcast, so I say what I think. Sometimes, if you think of generative AI can help you automate tasks that people perform today. Usually, these are tasks that are more simplistic and have some text associated with. And very often, a real business case is when you have 1,000 people doing the same task every day for 30 minutes. And now all of a sudden, you can reduce that time from 30 minutes to 1 minute. The first question that you might ask in these business value conversations is, okay, how many people can I fire now or get rid of? Because I'm saving that time, right? So I don't need that headcount anymore. And that's a tricky conversation because that's one thing that people fear that AI does to their job. And for me, it's also the wrong messaging. And three, in Germany, that doesn't even work because even if there's a business value associated, we have a lot of protection laws that wouldn't even allow you to convey that message. So what I personally like to address when we talk about business value is when we talk efficiency gains, then don't think about, I'm taking an example. If you think of engineers, they also have a lot of repetitive tasks. If you give them 30 minutes of their day back to look back into the things that matter more to a company, that are more innovative, that make them more productive, then you have the problem that this is exactly what you should do as a company, but you can't measure that. You can't go back and say, measure, okay, now my engineers are 30% more intelligent or innovative or something. So that's not a hard measurable task. So I personally find these value conversations always very, very hard. And that's why I love to take a different angle. Like to take the angle of customer. So think of HR. If you probably onboarded, you did onboard in a company already. So you've gone through an onboarding process. And if the onboarding is faster and your HR department doesn't need to put many time in, you could say, okay, you can make them more efficient. But what if they can make you more happy? Which means that you as an employee now feel happier, feel more productive. You can measure that because you can ask employees, this is the new tool. How do you like it? Does it make you more productive? Does it make you feel more valued? Does it make you feel, so you can ask those questions to employees and then they would come back and say, yeah, this is awesome. This new portal is amazing. This new process is great. Thank you for giving me more time. And then you come from the perspective of satisfaction, and then it becomes measurable. And then you can ask, say, a CIO or head of HR, and you could ask them if you could have a higher retention rate, how much money would you save a year? And I read once a statistic that hiring an IT person takes on average $50,000 just for hiring that person, like in kind of effort. And say if you lose 10 people a year, you need to hire 10 new people. That would be 500K, and then you can make it a business metric again. So to your question, I've been in these conversations. I don't like them, to be honest, because finding the right angle and the right argument, and then also the right metric to convince that this is the right approach is super hard. But my personal favorite approach is always take it from a customer perspective, be it your employee or your end customer, could also be your end customer, that you say, okay, if my churn rate is lowered and I keep more customers, that's the gain I'm having. So I always like to think about customer satisfaction. That often helps in conveying the right message, finding the right dollar sign, because you can find the dollar amounts easier. And that's the other thing that very good companies do. They care about their people. And when you have the head of HR, they usually love happy people in the company. They really care about that. So this is where you really get this positive vibe versus, hey, you're 100% more efficient, get rid of the people. It's not the right conversation to have, even though it's the easier metric to calculate at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of my impression when it comes to going for business metrics. But then last sentence to that, and then there is a reason why I always love to stay close to manufacturing and supply chain, because the metrics you get there are way easier to calculate. When you say, okay, I can improve my yield by 10%. That's so much easier to measure. Or when you say in your supply chain, I have 10% less disruptions, then it's not talking about people, it's talking about processes that are measurable, and you don't even come into that rabbit hole of saying the wrong thing at the right point in time. That's why I always love these spaces. But you can't avoid the people conversation when it comes to GenAI, because that's just what GenAI does, is automating tasks that are done manually today.
No, that's incredibly useful and could relate to lots of the points you mentioned there. And I hope that these conversations will also change in respect to, yes, it's really important to convert some of those metrics we're addressing into financial monetary equivalents, but then there are factors you mentioned in employee net promoter score, innovation, outcome, productivity. These are all things we, I guess, can measure. And unfortunately, historically, in many cases, when I try to enter some of these conversations, I said, okay, Fabian, show me the sort of historic examples. Now I say, it's something new. I can't show you historic examples because we've never done this before. And it's sort of the downward spiral from there. So there also seems to be, I guess, a cultural element to it, and probably one related to, I guess, our finance processes that in some respects need to change. Coming on to my next sort of, or one of my last questions, I promise, sort of building on the aspect you mentioned around automotive and manufacturing companies. What are some of the GenAI use cases you've seen in automotive and or manufacturing more widely that you would recommend firms to look into?
Okay, cool. I was hoping for such a question. I mentally prepared this sort of. One of my all-time favorite projects is energy management on the shop floor. And funnily, this doesn't have anything to do with generative AI, because you can solve these problems with simple machine learning tasks. And it's about data. It's about looking at the right data with a small AI model that helps you make the right decisions. But one thing that all automotive companies have in common, if you look at the annual reports, you can read through them, or you have GenAI summarize them for them, which is easier and faster. Everybody points out we want to be more sustainable, we want to be greener, we want to be, I don't know, more efficient. And it's very interesting when you look at how those companies in automotive operate their shop floors. sometimes, they have super new modern robotic, systems that measure every single data point and try to optimize whatever possible. But many factories, and I actually have a BMW factory down that road here, like 1.5 kilometers where I live. And this factory is, I don't know how many decades old. It's old, and they often have legacy systems. So it's not that easy that you come in and build a new, factory system in or whatever. So you need to look at what you have and optimize. And one of my favorite use cases is looking at the energy consumption of your assets. The common example I use is compressors, because a compressor is a really interesting machine. A compressor could run potentially 100 years without breaking. They are designed to run forever. But the older they get, the more energy they consume to compress this, the air and do something with it. And monitoring the energy consumption of these compressors, that's the only thing you need to do. Monitor it and put it in a dashboard. That already tells you over time if there's decay, if something goes wrong, or if you're just wasting money. And if you wanted and said, okay, I need to do AI because I have a mandate from my board that we're going to do AI everywhere, then it's a simple model basically that looks into how's the conversion between the air I'm compressing and the pressure I'm applying versus my energy consumption. The simple physical problem that probably every engineer knows better than I do. But with that model and the predictive power of AI, understanding how it will behave maybe next week, or how it will behave in the next hour, or how it will behave in combination with other compressors, already gives an insight into what am I doing maybe wrong, or which of the compressors need the maintenance. And with that, you can significantly reduce energy consumption. And if you had, say, 100, okay, that's a bit exaggerating, but say you have 20 factories worldwide, and you could save $200,000 a year on energy consumption per factory, that's a massive improvement for your financials, it's a massive improvement for your footprint. And at the same time, it's a lot of fun because it's a simple project that doesn't require heavy GenAI and immediately adds business value. That's kind of my favorite one. But since we already, we want to talk about GenAI too, what I think is coming, not today, but don't quote me on it, I think in 2 years, that's kind of my gut feeling, is that these onboard systems in cars, custom experience becomes more and more important. That you don't buy a car, you buy the computer in the car. So I'm one of these suspects that I don't buy the car, I buy the computer, and then there's a car around the computer. And those onboard systems at some point need to be intelligent enough to have conversation. And well, right now you have Alexa, you have Siri, you have Google, which is all nice. But I have the feeling that companies want to go really into the hardware system in their cars and ensure they have their own customized experience to their users or customers, drivers, to really make it feel personal to them. And at the moment, we have generative AI is built on top of these large language models, as we call them. And I think the next hype will be the small language models, which means that it's generative AI, but it's a smaller generative AI that is almost as powerful as the big brother, but it can reside in a car. And I can have a real human conversation within, in my car, running as an experience for the customer. And I think that's where automotive is headed. I'm not sure if I'm right, but what I'm seeing is that the small language models are getting more traction. And that's something also I think I can say that. And ServiceNow is not building like very large language models like an OpenAI. We're also counting on more the smaller ones that are tailored towards a use case. And the more companies adapt to that thought that smaller is sometimes better and more efficient, the smaller they get and the more intelligent they get, the higher the likelihood they end up in a car, because those chips in the car get more sophisticated and will be able to run those systems. Some of them are already doing that. I think this is where then talking about business value, because right now I just talk tech. If you translate it back to business, if you have a better customer experience while driving and interacting with your car, it's way likelier that you sell that car. I don't say what I'm driving. I'm driving a German car brand. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not really happy with my onboard system. The computer is not functioning well. The voice interaction never understands me. The navigation system is always wrong. That car is 5 years old, so it's not a 20-year-old car. And the company who gets that right first has a bigger edge towards customers, I think. And that's the GenAI thing that I'm seeing moving forward. But I'm also curious, since you also work in automotive, would you agree? Or would you say, okay, Michael, this is completely stupid and not really where we are headed? So I'm just curious, like giving that question back to the host actually here.
Wasn't prepared for that. No, I'm happy to share some sort of initial thoughts. I think there's definitely loads of work that's being done in edge and quantum computing, which would allow some of these computations just technologically to happen in the first place and or much more efficiently. And then in terms of use cases more widely, I think you're absolutely right that today we've got a little bit of a governance challenge in the industry where there are lots of isolated efforts, but I don't think this is exclusive to any function. I think we see this across the entire automotive value chain, starting with design, engineering, industrial operations, commercial, finance, HR. I think there are incredible use cases across all of them. And I think I would also echo what you said around the diverse set of metrics. I think there's loads of companies these days use objectives and key results. They essentially determine what success means for the respective organization. And then it's a little bit of like a nested system. We all do what we're incentivized to do in many respects. And then if you agree on the right metrics and you cascade them downwards the right way, then you should be able to do the right thing. And I think GenAI provides loads of potential across the chain, especially in sustainability, to improve organizations' diversity and inclusion in HR, and then of course lots of other efficiency and effectiveness gains. Last question from my side to you. Imagine that you talk to you mentioned the chief AI officer role. Maybe there's a chief data and AI officer or a chief AI officer. If you talk to him or her, what would be your top 3 recommendations?
So my favorite topic, people. Start with the people. Talk to your people. And when I say talk to people, don't talk to the team leaders and don't just solely talk to the IT department. Talk to the business units and ask them what they need and how they need enablement. So build an enablement curriculum and really ensure that everybody is on board. Or if not everybody, you can't please everyone. That's just how it is. But if you have the majority covered, really making understand what your job is, how you can help them, how you want to help them solve problems, and how you want to push forward, but not lose anyone along the journey. That would be number 1. 2, look into the right platform, which means that whatever you're doing, don't be blended by all these shiny objects out there. Every hyperscaler will tell you, we have the best model, we have the best capabilities, we are the best. Sometimes they're right, actually. But then that doesn't mean that solves your problems. So think about on which platform you want to build your success on. And well, hopefully they choose ServiceNow, of course. But jokes aside, it's like put your efforts into one approach, one platform, one stream, and make that work and drive one success story. Once you had that one success story and you've shown it's possible, then you just need to repeat that cycle, be it on the same platform or then on a different one, doesn't matter, but pick one thing, do it right, and prove the value. And 3 is, I think, don't take yourself too serious. Because, and I've been there as well, when I was a little data scientist years ago, and you're able to you understand machine learning, you feel like you're the champion of the world. You do all the amazing, fantastic, good stuff, and you know it all. You don't. And especially when you're leading a COE, or you're the head of AI or the chief data officer, whatever title you have, yes, your expertise and experience are crucial to steer the company into the right direction, to make them successful, that's for sure. But don't take yourself too serious, and sometimes just step back and observe what is going right and what is going wrong, and let others tell you what to do. Because what I've seen in almost every company I've worked in, the best and biggest ideas usually come from the day-to-day developer, who just comes around the corner and says, hey, I just wonder why we're not doing this or that. And this is kind of a light bulb going on, and like, oh yeah, why haven't I thought about it? Yeah, because you as a leader, be the project leader, be the, even organization leader, you're so stuck in your box on thinking, how do this strategically, how do I steer this, that you sometimes lose the track of what's going on. So step back, don't take yourself too serious, and just, listen at the end of the day, which, closes the circle to my first point, people. So it's all about people at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate your open and honest views, and there's loads of useful advice in there. So I'm definitely going to listen to this again. But yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, hopefully I get invited again soon.